Hi, I'm Andrea Goeglein, and joining me today is a dear friend and an incredible entrepreneur, Jack Colton from Silent Ridge. Why don't you say hello, Jack?
Hey, Andrea, thanks for having me on today.
Well, it's hard to find friends to have the really tough conversations with, and a conversation about suicide and how it's impacted us as individuals and in our lives and in our businesses. And, the observations that we've encountered, I think, and it's a Friday afternoon, and, the fact that you're willing to be open and have this conversation, and I will do the same with my experiences. And hopefully we'll just be able to help those who have lost loved ones, because clearly we're all here having this conversation, but the impact of the loss is clearly very visible in so many people's lives around suicide. So as a frame of reference, why don't you tell us why you would agree to do this for your friend on a Friday afternoon?
Of course. Well, I mean, first off, anything for you.
Yeah. Oh, I like that type of thinking. I like that kind of thinking.
No, it's I've recently had somebody who unfortunately succumbed to suicidal thoughts and took
Right.
their own life. As we were
And
discussing earlier,
this was a friend, a peer.
very close friend. Yeah.
Okay.
And on top of that, I grew up in a climate where my mom was suicidal, my father was, my sister was, all three were hospitalized for it.
Right.
And so it's kind of been something that's loomed around my life the entire time. So, probably because of that, it prepared me as much as you can be prepared to identify when there's people who are in legitimate crisis. And a lot of times you don't know, my friend who just committed suicide, really nobody knew,
Right.
and
I'm with
because
you.
the constant positivity that he projected,
Right.
you always kind of wonder if that's projecting in a way,
Yeah.
and trying to compensate rather for, what's actually going on. But
Right.
yeah. So that's kind of,
And I want to speak to those 2 points because I think they're so, so important. One, that feeling as a person and I will tell you in my own case, the most prevalent suicide happened in 2015 with the loss of my cousin, who was actually my co-author in a self-help book all about positive overcoming. I mean, this was someone I had known since his birth. Yet the number of friends that I have that have lost children of all ages, from teens into their 40s. There was one period of time, and I believe I actually went looking for it today, that I kept a sheet. And I know that 2009 was the year that, and there were something like 9 closely affiliated suicides within my world. Friends, children. And, you said something about the ability to be able to help and, the discerning whether or not, you should have known type of thing. And I think that's something all of us try and figure out. I know that in the case of my cousin Gary, he had the benefit that the second he left the house in the middle of the night, another cousin called because they lived together. And so up until the second he left that home, someone was reaching out to him. And it didn't matter. And that's one of the things I've always walked away from all of the conversations that I have around suicide is sometimes but the likelihood that you can do something is such a variable. I've gotten stories of parents on phones in the same room. We had a business associate where, he had planned even to have her agree to allow her to die also. And she was, startled beyond belief. And that had to do with a bad business dealing. So there is the number of versions, I think, is so great. So I think from the standpoint of positivity and well-being, that's where we come in, like taking care, cleaning our own mental houses around what could we really have done? Did we really miss something?
It's absolutely true. I mean, it's like I said, there's the whole kind of range of situations with it. And, first and foremost, I think it's important to give, an understanding and a grace to the people who are left behind,
Right.
because there's a lot of the cases where, probably most cases where you really couldn't do anything.
You
And
Nope.
there's ones where even when you are aware, you
Mhm.
try and you try and you take on the burden, and it is a
Yep.
burden to your life to really try to help somebody. And there's just, there's unfortunately something that they succumb to, and there's nothing you could do. You have cases like my friend back in July who, I mean, he clearly been planning it for a long time, and nobody knew,
Right.
and because he was projecting such positivity constantly, that I mean, he wouldn't have been in the top 50 if people had have guessed.
Okay, so that's what I help us understand. What did that look like on a day? What did positivity in that case look like?
I've got a theory, and this kind of fit directly into it, that a lot of times when you see people who are a little extra on like being positive,
Yes.
it could
A
be
little too happy? Yeah.
a little too happy, maybe they're constantly posting motivational quotes, maybe they're this, maybe that. It's something that to them is probably aspirational, and that they are really trying to achieve that, and it's actually a good thing that they are. And there's
Right.
a lot of people, most people, 95% plus people, it's a good thing. That's them kind of having positive reinforcement. It's what they're striving towards, and it's
Right.
them trying to heal and trying to push out the negativity.
Right.
With my friend, that was definitely him. He was probably more on the extreme side of it, where if anybody mentioned anything negative, he was like one of those goats that faints.
Okay. So tell me, like, were things like business, love, was that going okay in his life? And he was also projecting positivity, or were the aspects of his life really not going well, but he was saying all this positive stuff?
Well, so yes and no. And so probably just out of respect for him and his family, I'll be kind of very vague in details, if that's okay.
Sure,
But
sure.
there, he definitely had stresses, and everybody has stresses.
Right.
I think when it comes to people who, for whatever reason, that's kind of a go-to that's always in the back of their mind.
Mhm.
If you imagine a bridge that has a lot of weight on it from cars that are kind of, maybe
Mhm.
stuck in traffic, eventually, if there's like kind of a crack,
Right.
that another bridge, or even that bridge normally could take, kind of falls. And so
Right.
for him, he definitely had a lot of stresses that were there, health
Okay.
wise. Everybody's got financial issues here and there. I'm sure relationships,
Right.
stuff normal.
Right.
He, I believe, had a lot of bad influences that were adding extra to it, that were
Yeah.
probably supporting, him being untethered from, okay, this isn't the correct path. This isn't, my family and friends aren't going to be happy I did this, so on and
Right.
so on. He definitely had a very, very spiritual aspect of it that I think leaned into it, and a lot of people who were kind of feeding into that.
Okay. Yeah, I will tell you that in my case, and I'm just going to focus on my cousin Gary Russo, because there was like, I actually have a picture that was taken in June when I saw him, and I thought, wow, you don't look good. And, I will tell you that it was just like, well, people go through stuff. Because I had lived through enough stuff with him, there wasn't something that was outside the ordinary. And even the last phone call I had with him several weeks later, when I knew he wasn't doing great, because I asked, I said, you don't sound good, but he was calling me to help somebody else. Someone that we had written about in the book, this incredible older woman by the name of Lily Slom. She was in her late 80s. She had just found out that she was terminal, in a more critical sense, that, she only had about 5 or 6 months to live. And he was asking me to call her. So here was a person, when you talk about positivity, helping others is one of those things that help get you out of your own hole.
Sure.
He was doing that. That was my last call with him, was him asking me. And 15 days later, I was getting messages asking where he was. So that's how come I have a lot of respect for those who lose loved ones, to really be gentle with how much you think you could have stopped something. Because as with your friend, there was enormous planning. This isn't near suicide, from best I can tell, isn't nearly as happen chance as some would make it say, like, oh, things went bad and someone, decided to kill themselves. No, it takes an enormous amount. And I think that that's one of the important things about positivity. Yes, he had been able to use the positive aspects that he had learned and talked about. The moment in time that we wrote the book was a clear delineation and things moving in a direction he wanted. And then there's the respect that you can have that period, and then other periods of life come up. And can you hold on to the good long enough?
It's absolutely that. I think, positivity is good for everybody,
When
moving
it's grounded, when it is
moving,
grounded. Yeah.
exactly. But, you can't just be positive and all of a sudden that fixes a lot of the underlying issues.
Right.
And yeah, like there's some cases where if you remove negativity from your life, stuff starts snowballing in the right direction, and so on and so on. But
right.
It really got a deep-seated self-confidence issue, or self-hatred, or whatever it might be, mental health issue. Positivity is lipstick on a pig.
Right.
In those situations. And I think that's kind of the takeaway that I had, among many with them, is that, number one, you really do have to constantly focus on, like I said, a well-rounded approach to addressing issues.
Yep.
And two, for the most part, people who I've known who've made attempts, occasionally they mentioned it, occasionally there's signs, you really have to learn to pick up on the smaller ones. Mm-hmm. But it's usually not the loudest people in the room that are talking about it, that are actually doing the background,
that's just been an observation. I mean, I'm not trained to see it. I have no training in that area whatsoever. I've only experienced it in my life with loved ones all around me. And what I am noticing is that the person who says, I am suicidal, is the person who you may have an ability to get the help they need in present time. That the greatest challenge is the rest of them are all, no one has said, I'm going to commit suicide today, and given you a heads up. There may be signs with hindsight, but overall that it's like there's deep planning going on and they aren't talking about it.
I think a lot of times the ones who are, the loudest about it, and to be very clear, their feelings are very genuine on it. The pain is very real.
Right. Exactly.
There's 2 or 3 people in particular that have been in my life who have been very vocal. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest risk to them isn't like, oh, I'm going to go do this or do that. It's that they put themselves in riskier situations where death could happen.
Right. And absolutely. The whole thing about the positivity and the well-being, I want to talk about how your well-being has been impacted by the loss of your friend.
It definitely was a kick in the gut. Mm-hmm. I mean, outside of the obvious of mourning your friend, right. Because I've been so surrounded by people who were in crisis, especially growing up, right. It really made me make changes in my life so that I didn't end up the same way.
Yes.
And so that was, it was definitely a big kick in the gut.
Is there anything that you can share about those changes you've made when you've observed that this is where humans can get when they allow themselves to get there, because we all live the same type of tragedies. And I will tell you, in Gary's case, that was always the conversation in the weeks following. He wasn't in a situation that looked different than other points in his life, whether it was love, money, business, whatever it was. These cycles of up and down had always been there. And that's why I think it's only with hindsight that you can see certain things a little deeper. But I am the first to admit, I still would not have believed this.
It's kind of one of those things where if you're aware of your blind spots,
Yep.
typically, and I think this is true for anybody, when you're happy, when you're sad.
Yep.
If you can kind of start recognizing the trends of when you're sad,
Yep.
What's leading to that, what's causing that. And when you get into the depths of it,
Sure.
what are some commonalities there?
Yes.
What are the thoughts? Why are your thoughts going that way?
Yeah.
And, probably best case scenario is when things are good, actually start pressing, and seeking answers. I mean, if it were easy, you'd have already found the answers, and you didn't get to that place overnight.
Right.
And so do something different, reach out to different people. I think, if anybody's watching, our conversation now and is in that position, that's kind of what I would say is like, you're listening to this for a reason. Keep doing things like this, and seek help when times are good, not just when they're bad, and actually make a willingness to actually make the changes that you need to overall. You already recognize there's a problem. So
Yep.
that's the first step. Just keep it going.
Yeah. And, I really think that we could end our conversation on just the last things that you said, that part of it for the well-being of those who are left and for those who are challenged with suicidal ideation, catch it early, start noticing your thoughts, do the work in the good times, such as the reading, getting together with others, talking with people in the good times, basically build up that army of support so that the potential of you having someone by your side when you're making these types of decisions could be different. So I will say that, the whole thing on our thoughts, I don't care if you are the person who has the ideations or if you're really just maintaining your day-to-day life, catching your thoughts as quickly as possible and turning them around, not with false positivity, but at least looking at it to say, oh, wait a minute, that thought is going to get me in trouble. Is that the path I want to take?
It's exactly that. I mean, an example, and there's obviously, a variety of reasons that people have and types of thoughts of that. You have a lot of people who are triggered by an interaction with a loved one.
Oh boy.
And so a lot of their thought process when in their dark times goes into, well, this will show them, this will do that, this will that. And, that it's not the answer at all.
Right.
And a lot of times that's an overreaction to their own self-love or lack thereof. And so, that's one of the things. So when people are trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next? Really think deeper and go deeper into, the thought process. If you're only thinking about other people, then it's really the self-healing you've got to do. It's not nothing. People come and go. You don't know.
Well, I'm going to leave that just as it is because you've said it and as well, if not better than I could have. And I think that advice is where I would love for us to leave everybody, knowing that I will put the National Hotline, Suicide Hotline, and now everybody gets to meet my staff member. Ivy. Hi, Ivy. And Jack, thank you. We've had a lot of conversations like this and we'll have a lot more. And I guess what we need to always know for each other is that we are here for each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And technology like this allows us to be 2,000 miles and still have the conversation.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for putting this together. And I look forward to seeing, this and, the expanded.
Beautiful. Have a best afternoon that you can, and I'll talk with you soon. Thanks.
Likewise.
Bye.